tame you. More cover, Captain. You will perish. Positively invigorating. And I will. It is a ripper, driven man. Ladies, gentlemen, and Forge Knights of all ages, how do you like rocket launchers? How about saw blades? People keep telling me, oh, Amon's weak, Amon struggles in higher Ultimate Vault Hunter modes. Well, that's only true if you don't know how to turn him into a living, breathing, walking artillery cannon. If you like Ordinance and Borderlands, then this is the build for you. If you like crushing bosses on the hardest difficulty in the game in less than 30 seconds, even on the character with the lowest potential peak damage, this is the build for you. And if you like walking through mobs without even having to aim at them, well, you guessed it, that's this guy right here. The core synergy making this all work is the Endless Bombardment passive with Heavy Ordnance. And while it can actually work with most Heavy Ordnance options thanks to how we build this, it works the best with Heavy Ordnance capable of hitting more than once per shot that you fire. Things like multiple projectiles being fired for the cost of 1 ammo, or things that bounce. This doesn't work quite as well with grenades, sadly, because you can't refund more than 1 grenade per grenade that you use, but Heavy Ordnance has the refund chance anytime it does damage, and that is the core of all of this. On top of that, a neat thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the Heavy Ordnance all count as guns and gun damage for the sake of a lot of things that affect those things. Not necessarily all of the gun specific effects will apply, but if something very generally states like gun damage as an example, and that's without even counting the specialization node that adds a percentage of gun damage increases to Ordnance. It just seems that these heavy weapons are coded to be Ordnance, but also count as guns for a lot of the ways that the game calculates its sort of stats. So that's the sort of base knowledge that you need to understand all of the choices that we are making from here forwards. First up then, let's go over the skill tree, and I won't be doing this in too careful of an order because this is an endgame build, and to make it really work properly, you do need to be level 50. That said, let's start with Cybernetics, which is the green tree. This is not the home of the actual action skill we'll be using, but it is arguably our most important tree to make the build function. 5 points into Executioner for the increased critical damage, doubled after a melee, but we don't really trigger the melee part, so just the base crit damage bonus. 5 points into Gathering Storm for increased elemental damage as a kill skill that can stack for a decent pile of bonus damage. Then we put 5 ranks into Vital Organs. What this does is it's a kill skill that grants us critical hit chance in general with guns as a baseline, regardless of where you actually hit the enemy, and this is where it's important to know that these heavy weapon ordinances do count as guns, so this does give our ordnance crit chance within our setup. We put 5 points into Cacophony over in the left branch here for increased ordnance damage and detonation damage, though we aren't doing anything detonation based, so this is mostly just for the ordnance damage, and then 5 points into Endless Bombardment. This is your #1 priority skill to find on class mods. It is a requirement to make this build function properly and make it be comfortable, and you want at least 3 ranks of this skill on your class mod to make it work. If your class mod has more than 3 ranks, you can technically take a couple of these points out of here and use them elsewhere a bit, which gives us a bit more damage, but I'll talk about that at the very end for the people that do have that luck. But you want this to be always at least at 8 ranks no matter how you achieve it. It gives us 48% chance to refund 1 ammo when doing any damage with heavy ordnance, which when combined with the rest of our setup and the fact that we are using multi-hit ordnance options, this is the perfect sweet spot where it doesn't feel like you're ever going to run out of ammo unless you play it very poorly and just don't hit enemies. After this, we move over to the blue tree, which is Vengeance over here, and this is the actual action skill that we'll be taking today, which is Scourge. This, when activated, puts a shield in front of you that absorbs all projectiles to a certain limit, and then starts to just be damage reduction. But through our setup, it will be the full absorption the vast majority of the time while it's active. You can re-trigger the action skill while it's active to put out forge waves and throw them at enemies, but we don't actually use those despite them doing ordnance damage, because unlike our heavy ordnance launchers, this does not also count as gun damage. It only counts as ordnance damage and I guess also skill damage, of course. So it scales completely differently to what our main setup is. Here we take 5 ranks into Scorched Kairos specifically for increased ordnance damage and magazine size. It doesn't specify that, but the magazine size does apply to ordnance, which gives us a bit more to work with when waiting for our refunded ammo. I've also got some bonus ranks in this from my class mod, but those aren't a requirement Augment, it's just a nice bonus of the class mod that I'm using. This lets us get to our Augment, which is going to be Cryonic Thrum. And this is one of the fun bonus things that we get to play around because of heavy launchers counting as guns as well as ordnance. The main thing here that we care about is while you are aiming down sights, you lose movement speed, but you gain 35% bonus damage as cryo damage, as well as consuming vengeance with every single shot you do. With our big high fire rate launcher we use for single target fights, you can keep your vengeance easily bottomed out through this, which means that you will have full damage absorption pretty constantly, which is great for tankiness. As well, I should mention that attached to the action skill is the Firewall Forge skill. This lets you put down a wall on the battlefield that both blocks enemy projectiles and boosts any friendly projectiles that go through it, increasing their damage by a further 25% and increasing their projectile speed too. And this does count for our ordnance shots, so for our burst damage, you will have to aim down your sights a little bit for the Augment, you'll have to aim through the wall to get the full advantage that offers too, but it is very strong. We also grab 5 points in the Tail of the Comet passive here. This gives us a 30% chance to apply a cryo damage over time status to enemies for 60% of the damage dealt by ordnance per second for 4 seconds. This means that it gives us a frequent status application, which enables some other parts, but importantly, as we are in an ordnance-focused build, this just basically echoes a portion of our damage that we're doing constantly over and over and over again. It gives us more damage from what we're already doing. Then we're going to be grabbing 5 points in Bullet Hail, and this is a pretty funky one with what we're doing. It makes all gunshots have a chance to ricochet as elemental shards that deal cryo damage. 5 points in this is 20% chance of 75% of the original hit's damage being ricocheted. And the important thing to note here is that this does work with our heavy launchers. Rockets will ricochet into elemental shards through the skill node. We then grab 5 ranks of the Blackout passive over here in the right side branch, which gives us 15% bonus crit chance for Ordnance specifically, which is pretty big in itself. And then also this makes any critical hits you get with Ordnance apply 105% of their damage dealt per second as a shock damage debuff. So it is another status that we apply through our Ordnance damage stacking. And then our final 4 points go into Tactician right here, which gives us bonus fire rate while hip firing, bonus gun damage while aiming down sights, and the fire rate is nice when you're just sort of running around. Not a big deal to lose the gun handling for our mobbing setup the way that we do this, and the gun damage boosts while aiming are great for our single target bursting for bigger bosses. And it's worth noting that we will not have a capstone in this build because all of the capstones make this function worse, at least the ones that we can reach, and if we were to go out of our way to reach one of the other ones, it would lose us too many good things, so we use no capstone, and this is the way that the build is best. I did mention earlier if your class mod has more ranks of the Endless Bombardment passive than mine does, you can move some points out. You want to hit 8 points worth in this passive no matter how you achieve it, so if your class mod has 5 ranks instead of 3, you can actually move 2 points out of this and put them elsewhere in the skill tree. As for where to put them if you do have that option, I would stick one rank right into Stoked right here. This is increased fire rate after you deal ordnance damage. This will very, very easily and quickly and consistently hit maximum stacks for the way that we're playing, so even just 1 point in this is a pretty consistent 6% fire rate. Then I would also put 1 point back into the Tactician passive over here, getting that to the full 5 ranks just for the full bonuses from it. For your Specialization Tree, things do get a bit funky, and because of how Specialization works, I will go in order for this section. 10 points into Survivor, which lets us get both bonus maximum health and bonus maximum shields, which is lovely to have, and it unlocks the passive Bullets Are Scared of Me, which you can use for now, but we won't be using that long term. Next up, you want to put 10 points directly into Brute, which gives you bonus gun damage. Gun damage will be scaling with our Ordnance the way that the build is working, so it does work quite nicely, but also this importantly lets us unlock Gadgeteer. This is the Ordnance focused sort of pathway down the specializations, so we want to immediately put 10 points into Gadgeteer. What this gives us is Ordnance cooldown rate, which only really matters if you mess up. Your Ordnance will only go on cooldown if you're not hitting enemies with it. Once you have 10 points into here, you will unlock Full Spectrum Arsenal. This makes Ordnance damage benefit from increases to gun damage at 50% effectiveness. Again, Ordnance does already benefit from certain gun damage effects, so this essentially is double dipping as a result of that by making the Ordnance itself also gain an extra 50% of the increases to gun damage as an extra bonus. Then past that, you immediately want to put another 10 points right into Gadgeteer to unlock the final sort of passive here, which we also will be taking, which is Fragmentation Payload. This gives Ordinance a just base chance to critically hit, an extra 5%, and also gives all Ordinance critical hits an extra 50% damage, which is lovely within our setup. We then want to put 10 more points into Survivor, and what we do this for is to unlock specifically the Best Defense passive. What this does is give you increased damage dealt up to 30%, scaling based on the fullness of your shield or health. Our shield has higher maximum capacity, so based on our shield and the way that our setup works, we should always be at maximum shield while we're actually firing, which makes us just 30% bonus damage just in general. We then put another 10 points into the Brute passive right here, specifically to unlock Riddle You This. Whenever the Vault Hunter deals gun damage, gain a stack of this buff, which increases your gun damage further. Important thing to note, again, because Ordnance does count for stuff like this, you can even see the buff popping up in the bottom left with this symbol when I am firing my Ordnance. This means that the Ordnance gains these stacks, and because of our fire rate with this and the fact that it will be bouncing around, we'll have multiple projectiles, we can get to the full buff relatively quickly, which is up to 50% bonus damage, which again is for some reason also applying to our launchers even if you don't have full spectrum arsenal, but it applies even harder if you do. That said, this is just a very strong buff. It does require a little bit of buildup, which is why I recommend saving this for the last of our sort of 4 passive that you actually want equipped, but it is a very, very powerful one. Past this point, we aren't unlocking any more things that we want to actually put on our sort of equipped list on the left, but you will be able to just infinitely gain specialization points, so I should mention where they're going to go. Until you have at least 10 more points in this, you want to just stick them directly into Brute. The main reason for this is that it just gives you extra gun damage, which scales everything that we're doing at least a little bit, but once you have at least 10 more points, once you're at level 71 specialization, you would then want to respec, put those last 10 points, instead of putting an extra 10 in Brute, put them into Sharpshooter, which would then unlock the Killer node, which you would then want to put a bunch of your points in moving forwards. This gives you increased critical hit damage and status effect damage. Both of those affect us massively. We do a lot of crits. Our crit hit damage is high, so having more of that is great, and we apply statuses through our Ordnance and through our Ordnance crit, so it all just sort of stacks together. That said, this is where you want to be putting your passive points for a very long time afterwards, basically until the point where 1 point of this is worth half as much as 1 point of Brute. And once you get to that stage, you just want to sort of alternate points back and forth. But Killer is generally the more valuable of the two nodes to just shove points into, and that pretty much does it for specialization. That is our long-term goals. For our guns then, these almost completely do not matter. The whole main goal of this build is permanently having Ordnance active, so your actual weapon slots only come into play if you either mess up with the Ordnance and don't get your refunds because you're not hitting enemies, or if you get downed into your second wind, as you can't use Ordnance in second wind. So I just recommend having a general, nice, high damage gun that you can use to get yourself up, such as Rainbow Vomit, which is a legendary Jakobs elemental shotgun that drops from Leader Willem, who is a boss that is unlocked through the side quest chain that starts with Enter the Electi, which is in Carcadia City. This then ends with the Mole's Gambit quest at the end of the chain, where you will fight Leader Willem for the first time. Or another really solid option is Hot Slugger. This is just a really strong Jakobs shotgun that drops from Chad, the boss of the Order bunker, over in the heart of the mountain area of the Terminus Range region. But again, any solid weapon will do fine here. We will barely ever need your actual guns. For our other slots then, our most important one is Ordnance, so let's start right there. For big bosses like the ones with 2 or 3 health bars to chew through, especially on Ultimate Vault Hunter 5, you want a Torgue multi-missile launcher. This is a heavy ordnance that fires out a load of rockets very, very quickly. It is easily noticed when you're reading the tooltip when you're searching for drops when they drop from enemies, because it has around 30 shots. Most rocket launcher heavy ordnances will sit anywhere from like 6 shots before they go on cooldown, but this specific archetype always has a ton more. You can technically make this build work with like the vast majority of heavy ordnances, but this one does the best job from what I've been able to mess with myself in single target. The ideal 2 modifiers on this item would be 2 shot, which I do have here. This makes every time you fire, shoot out 2 rockets, but still only consume 1 ammo. This combined with our 48% chance exactly to refund 1 ammo whenever you do ordnance damage already makes us almost infinitely loop our ammo here. But we also have things like our ricochets too, which help with that. They can proc it too, and we have another item I'll be talking about in a moment too, which also gives us some more ordnance ammo. But the 2-shot modifier just makes it a much stronger ordnance option than it otherwise would be. That said, my other modifier is completely wasted in this setup because we don't need the extra magazine sides, so instead it would be way better as the fire rate increase modifier, which is like 30% bonus fire rate over what I have, and that is only ever a negative if you would be running out of ammo too quickly. But with our setup, that will not happen, so it just makes it deal the damage it would already be dealing, but 30% faster. launcher. So this build actually has a fair bit of room for upward growth in single target boss fights than even what I've been showing in the footage in the video already. As for mobbing, you want to swap this out to instead be a disc jockey. The best general use option of these would be kinetic. It can drop as multiple elements, but kinetic makes it so that you don't get damage reductions from just random enemies out in the world, and the main purpose of this is that you can literally just shoot it at the ground, and its bouncing discs will then home at enemies. So you shoot at the ground, it bounces, it hits the enemy, it goes through them, it bounces to a new enemy, and so each time that you fire one disc, it is capable of going to do damage more than 5 times, which works incredibly well within our setup to give it that beautiful infinite ammo loop with our passive that gives us that effect. But because it just automatically flings itself at enemies, it actually makes all mobbing in this build very, very simple. Barely any thought is required. You just fire discs at the floor and they will find the enemies around them and kill them, with the only consideration being to make sure that you do not spam out all of your shots before they start to actually hit people, because if you shoot out your whole load before you start getting ammo refunded, you can put your ordnance on cooldown. So it's better to make sure that you just never go below around 3 or 4 ammo with this. Pace your shots as necessary, they will get the damage done. As for where to get this one, it is a dedicated drop from Sydney Pointy Legs, the boss of the drill site right here in the Fade Fields, who also happens to be the Moxxi's big encore weekly boss fight at the time of this video going up, which means that you can use that specific mechanic if you're in the endgame to spend your iridium and farm legendaries like this a little bit easier than you would be able to do otherwise. It's worth mentioning as well that this also works perfectly fine for bosses if you do just not want to change your ordnance ever. You can just stick this on and never replace it, but if you want to fully min-max yourself for every situation, that's why we swapped to that high fire rate launcher for single target boss fights. For your rep kit then, this isn't overly important, honestly. You can manage with just about anything, but the Warpaint rep kit gives you 30% fire rate and move speed after you use it, which is great for setting up burst windows on bosses. And I've got one that rolled with the Enrage modifier for 30% bonus damage at the cost of 15% increased damage taken, but that is pretty much the perfect roll within the setup too, though you can get fire rate bonuses or other useful offensive effects on your rep kit too that also work just fine. The main thing that you're after here is just the legendary effect to begin with. The rep kit then is not a requirement to function this build, it's just a requirement to be able to scale the single target burst specifically. But if you do want this for yourself, it is a dedicated drop from the boss of this drill site right here, the one that is right at the border of the Terminus range region right before it turns into the Fade Fields. Then we get to the class mods, and this specific one that you want is called Calculating Cyborg. This is the archetype name that has the exact skills that we are after. The green launcher in the circle passive, that's the most important one. You want 3 ranks of that at a minimum for this to be truly comfortable. That is our passive that gives us back ordnance ammo when we deal ordnance damage. The launcher and grenade inside of a shield symbol passive, that is skilled you need exactly 1 rank of, and the easiest way to get it is through your class mod because it's pretty far off to the side in the actual skill tree. More than 1 rank of this is excessive and unnecessary, but that 1 singular rank is very important to have. What that skill is, to be clear, is that it gives us overshield anytime that we deal ordnance damage. So with our rapid ordnance damage, constant ordnance damage setup, it gives us just constant, ludicrous amounts of overshield, just completely filling you up on that. And that's where a lot of our survivability actually comes from, as well as enabling our next item too. As for the actual stat modifiers on this though, ordnance damage would be top priority, critical hit damage is solid, element damage isn't bad either, and it just sort of descends in value past that point. For your shield, you don't technically need any one to make it function, but the one that fits perfectly into this setup is the Super Soldier Legendary Shield. When your shields are full, with this you gain 25% bonus fire rate and movement speed, and you regenerate 1 ammo per second. The 1 ammo per second does count for ordnance, so we regain 1 shot per second just passively due to this, and we keep it permanently active through that passive we just talked about on our class mod that gives us overshield whenever we deal ordnance damage. Overshield will keep our base shield capped because it will stop the damage that comes in from doing regular shield damage, and that will keep the Super Soldier effect active. My Super Soldier Shield also has the Siphon modifier, which I highly recommend if you can find that combo. This gives you a chance to gain bonus overshield when you deal damage, and this build has a lot of fast damage dealing, so lots of overshield gain opportunities. As for where to get this one, it is one of the dedicated drops from Vile Lictor, the big main story boss of the Terminus range region. Then our final slot is our enhancement, and that's where this gets honestly really funky. Enhancements do not affect our ordnance at all as far as their actual effects. Even Torgue enhancements do not do anything to boost our Torgue launcher, but the actual stats that can roll do affect them. Specifically, the really general ones like gun damage and gun splash damage both do boost ordnance damage in this case, but gun fire rate doesn't seem to work. I'm not certain on that, but I didn't notice the fire rate changing at the very least, whereas gun damage and gun splash damage definitely do increase it. So this will take some fiddling to find the absolute perfect enhancement. Mine is like level 29, it's not even close to max level, it's just the best option that I have right now for the conditions that we are trying to fill. Then finally, let's talk about your firmware. For firmware, you just want the exact set of 5 that I've got across your 5 slots down here. Which slot is which does not matter at all. Do it however works with the equipment that you have to work from. But what you want to hit is 3 ranks of Gadget Ahoy. This gives us Ordnance cooldown reduction, Ordnance damage increase, which is the really important part, and increased general damage overall for 15 seconds after an Ordnance kill, which is specifically great for mobbing or any boss fight that does have adds. For our other 2 slots for firmware, we want to get 2 ranks of Airstrike. First rank is 20% splash radius increase, second rank is 20% splash damage, and this does affect our Ordnance damage for both of our Ordnance choices too. That totally covers how to put the actual build together then, all of the moving parts required to make it work to begin with, and then to make it properly shine and reach its peak. But before we end, let's quickly go over how to play it properly for the best results. In mobbing, you just want to walk around with Disc Jockey in your hands and throw out shots from it at the ground in the vague vicinity of the enemy. They will bounce to their targets as long as they are somewhat close, and it is actually literally worse if you were to try and purposefully aim these at your enemies because they do more damage after they bounce. So aim them at the floor on purpose. You do ideally want to aim down sights when you actually fire them as well, as that gives you some extra gun damage, which then translates to ordnance damage. But even on UVH 5, this is only required if you really want to push your speed up. It really is just as simple as firing these saw blades out and making sure that you never go below 3 or 4 ammo count just to prevent it from going on cooldown. And while you can do things like whipping out your action skill or sticking down the Firewall forward skill or using your rep kit for enrage, all of these things will increase your damage for a short period of time, but they will put your ordnance away in your pocket. They're a little bit of interruption to your gameplay loop, and you literally do not need them to obliterate enemies on the hardest difficulty in the game if the rest of your setup matches what I'm using here. You can just fire Disc Jockey at the floor and run around like a maniac while everything dies. For single target, we do have a small bit of setup just to make sure our burst window goes as hard as it can. Specifically, to start a fight off, you want to activate Scourge, your action skill, stick down a Firewall, which is your forward skill, and you want to put it down at an angle where you can shoot through it to hit the boss. You want to use your rep kit for the fire rate and enrage if you have the modifier that I have too. Then you can take out your ordnance, aim down sights, and fire away through the wall at the boss. This gives you every buff that we could have, and it is a relatively simple setup for the actual damage output results that you get from it. And as mentioned earlier, you can technically do bosses with the Disc Jockey just fine as well, but it is slower than using a good rapid fire Torgue launcher. Not that that really matters unless you're playing on UVH 4 or 5 at that point. That just about does it for today then, everyone. The absolute peak of Amon that I've found or seen so far. Massive damage, massive survivability, and the absolute non-stop enjoyment of infinite ordnance usage. Because, well, guns are cool. Big guns are big cool. And if there's one thing about Amon, it's that he's big. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and I hope you enjoy using this for yourselves too if you try it out in game. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, I'm the conductor of the poop train! Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.